Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to another video today. My name is Chris, and today we have about 137 non-closing Sears Hometown, Home and Life, Appliance Mattress / Appliance Showroom locations that I do have on this list. This does not include the one in Houston, Texas that is currently closing, and the one in Minnesota rather, that very recently announced that they were going to be closing as well. So it's a lot of locations. So yeah, it's a lot of it's definitely a lot of locations. So I do have to take this one out. I'm sorry, I believe it's 136. Because as obviously today, Houston, Texas announced that they were closing as well. So that number is down to 136 approximate Sears hometown locations. This is a lot of Sears hometown locations. It's a pretty big list, and unfortunately, as much as I hate to say it, it's a pretty big chunk of what's basically left of Sears at this point. If there are any additional locations that you guys know about that I do not know about, please let me know in the comment section below. But again, a store in Minnesota closed about 2 days ago, and the one in Willowbrook Mall in Houston, Texas. If there's another one in Houston, Texas, again, please let me know in the comment section below, and I will add it to this list. But this is about 137 Sears hometown, home and life, appliance mattresses, and appliance showrooms. So 137, so let's get started with this list because it is a long one. So buckle up, sit back, relax, grab a drink, grab a popcorn, because this is going to be a very long list. So we have the Sears hometown store in Andalusia, Alabama, the Sears hometown store in Selma, Alabama, the Sears hometown store in Oneonta, Alabama, the Sears hometown store in Jackson, Alabama, the Sears hometown store in Enterprise, Alabama, and the Sears hometown store in Foley, Alabama. In Alaska, we have the Sears Home and Life location in Anchorage, Alaska. We have the Sears Hometown store in Fountain Hills, Arizona. The Sears Hometown store in Bullhead City, Arizona. The Sears Hometown store in Berryville, Arkansas. The Sears Hometown store in Monticello, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Camden, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Clarksville, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Harrison, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Russellville, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Cressette, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Ashflat, Arkansas, and the Sears Hometown store in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Wynne, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in West Helena, Arkansas, the Sears Hometown store in Cabot, Arkansas, and finally we get to those are all the Sears hometown stores in Arkansas and as well as Arizona. Next we get to the state of California, and there's only a few Sears hometown stores that do remain in the state of California. So we have the Sears hometown store in Auburn, California, the Sears hometown store in Yucca, California, the Sears hometown store in Tehachapi, California, the Sears hometown store in Napa, California, the Sears hometown store in Taft, California, the Sears hometown store in Coachella, California, the Sears hometown store, and then finally we get to the state of Colorado. It's the Sears Appliance store in Fort Collins, Colorado, the Sears hometown store in Montrose, Colorado, the Sears hometown store in Sterling, Colorado, the Sears hometown store in Durango, Colorado, the Sears hometown store in Saladilla, Colorado, the Sears hometown store in Alamasa, Colorado, the Sears hometown store in Trinidad, Colorado. Then we get to the state of Delaware, the Sears hometown store in Seaford, Delaware, and the Sears hometown store in Middletown, Delaware. Next, we get to the state of Florida. We have the Sears hometown store in Fort Pierce, Florida, the Sears hometown store in Summerfield, Florida, the Sears hometown store in St. Augustine, Florida, the Sears hometown store in Dunellen, Florida, the Sears hometown store in Strake, Florida. Then we get to Georgia. We have the Sears hometown store in Statesboro, Georgia, and the Sears hometown store in Dublin, Georgia, as well as the Sears hometown store in Sandersville, Georgia, the Sears hometown store in Blairsville, Georgia, and the Sears hometown store in Monterey, Georgia. In the state of Hawaii, we have the Sears Appliance and Mattress store located in Honolulu, Hawaii. In the state of Idaho, we have the Sears hometown stores in Burley, Idaho, and the Sears hometown store in Mountain Home, Idaho. And in Illinois, we have the Sears hometown store in Enniskillenham, Illinois, DeKalb, Illinois, Enifgam Sears Hometown in Enifgam, Illinois, the Sears Hometown store in DeKalb, Illinois, the Sears Hometown store in Floria, Illinois, the Sears Hometown store in Jacksonville, Illinois, the Sears Hometown store in Harrisburg, Illinois, the Sears Hometown store in Honolulu, Illinois, the Sears Hometown store in Connorsville, I'm sorry, those are the Sears Hometown stores in Illinois. And then if Idaho, it's the Sears Hometown store in Burley, Idaho, and the Sears Hometown store in Mountain Home, Idaho. Then in the state of Indiana, we have two Sears Hometown stores. They're the Sears Hometown store in Cornsville, Indiana, and the Sears Hometown store in Angola, Indiana. In Iowa, we do have a couple. We have the Sears Hometown store in Fort Dodge, Iowa, the Sears Hometown store in Burlington, Iowa, the Sears Hometown store in Mason City, Iowa, and finally the Sears Hometown store in Fairfield, Iowa. In the state of Kansas, we have a couple. The Sears Home and Life location located in Overland Park, Kansas, the Sears Hometown store in Independence, Kansas, the Sears Hometown store in Ottawa, Kansas, the Sears Hometown store in Dodge City, Kansas, the Sears Hometown store in Hayes, Kansas, the Sears Hometown store in Chapman, Kansas, the Sears Hometown store in Atchison, Kansas. In the state of Kentucky, we have the Sears Hometown store in South Williamson, Kentucky, the Sears Hometown store in Danville, Kentucky, the Sears Hometown store in Somers, Kentucky, and the Sears Hometown store in Pikeville, Kentucky, and finally the Sears Hometown store in Middleborough, Kentucky. In the state of Louisiana, we have about three of them, but only two, but one being a Home and Life location. We have the Sears Home and Life location in Lafayette, Louisiana. We have the Sears Hometown store in Bogalusa, Louisiana, and Deerder, Louisiana. In the state of Maine, we have the Sears Hometown store in Farmington, Maine, and the Sears Hometown store in Caribou, Maine. In the state of Maryland, we have the Sears Hometown store in Chestertown, Maryland. In the state of Michigan, we have the Sears Hometown stores in Charo, Michigan, and the Sears Hometown store in Fenton, Michigan. In the state of Minnesota, with that one closure, we're down to the Sears Hometown store in Little Falls, Minnesota, and the Sears Hometown store in Hutchinson, Minnesota as well. In Mississippi, we have a couple of Sears Hometown stores in Mississippi. We have the Sears Hometown store in Oxford, Mississippi, the Sears Hometown store in Vicksburg, Mississippi, the Sears Hometown store in Brookhaven, Mississippi, the Sears Hometown store in Natchez, Mississippi, the Sears Hometown store in Moggy, Mississippi, the Sears Hometown store in Greenwood, Mississippi, the Sears Hometown store in Bryman, Mississippi, and finally the Sears Hometown store in Olive Branch, Mississippi. In the state of Missouri, we have a couple of Sears Hometown locations. The Sears Hometown store in Nevada, Missouri, the Sears Hometown store in Avila, Missouri, the Sears Hometown store in Clinton, Missouri, the Sears Hometown store in Maryville, Missouri, and that's basically it. In the state of Montana, we have a couple of Sears Hometown locations. I'm sorry, not only one Sears Hometown location in Montana, and it's the Sears store at the Kalispell, at the Sears Hometown store in Kalispell, Montana. In Nebraska, we have definitely a handful of Sears Hometown locations. We have the Sears Hometown store in Columbus, Nebraska, the Sears Hometown store in Chatterton, Nebraska, the Sears Hometown store in Kearney, Nebraska, and the Sears Hometown store in Norfolk, Nebraska, and the Sears Hometown store in Fremont, Nebraska. In the state of New Mexico, we have the Sears Hometown store in Carlsbad, New Mexico, the Sears Hometown store in Silver City, New Mexico, and the Sears Hometown store in Risotto Downs, New Mexico. In the state of New York, we have the Sears Hometown store in Warsaw, New York, the Sears Hometown store in Oneonta, New York, and finally the Sears Hometown store in Cobleskill, New York. In the state of North Carolina, we have the Sears store in Aberdeen, North Carolina, the Sears Hometown store in Sanford, North Carolina, and the Sears Hometown store in Murphy, North Carolina, and finally the Sears Hometown store in Spruce Pine, North Carolina. In the state of Ohio, we have the Sears Hometown store in Bowling Green, Ohio, the Sears Hometown store in Norwalk, Ohio, and then we get to Oklahoma. We have the Sears Hometown store in Elk City, Oklahoma, and the Sears Hometown store in Atlas, Oklahoma, the Sears Hometown store in Muskeg, Oklahoma, and then we get to the state of Oregon. There's a couple. We have the Sears Hometown store in North Bend, Oregon, the Sears Hometown store in Ontario, Oregon, the Sears Hometown store in McMinnville, Oregon, the Sears Hometown store in Harbor, Oregon, and the Sears Hometown store in Florence, Oregon. And finally, we get to the state of Pennsylvania. So the first one, we have a Sears Appliance and Mattress store located in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, and we have the Sears Hometown store in Kittanag, Pennsylvania, and in St. Mary's, and the Sears Hometown store in Kittanag, Pennsylvania, the Sears Hometown store in Pleasantville, Pennsylvania, and finally the Sears Hometown store in Pleasantville, Pennsylvania. Then we get to Puerto Rico. We have the Sears Hometown store in Ta Braja, Puerto Rico, Barnacuitez, Puerto Rico, and Goldia, Puerto Rico, and the Sears Hometown Store in Manitou, Puerto Rico. And then that's basically it. In Rhode Island, we have the Sears Hometown Store in North Kingston, Rhode Island. In South Carolina, we have the Sears Hometown Store in Greenwood, South Carolina, and the Sears Hometown Store in Walterboro, South Carolina. In the state of South Dakota, we have the Sears Hometown Store in Spearfish, South Dakota. In Tennessee, we have the Sears Hometown Store in Crossville, Tennessee, and we've got a couple of ones in Texas. We have the Sears Hometown Store in Perry, Texas. The Sears Hometown Store in Sealy, Texas. The Sears Hometown Store in El Capo, Texas. The Sears Hometown Store in Liberty, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Cresconica, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Nacogdoches, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Bay City, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Uvalde, Texas, which, of course, no comment on that one, the Sears Hometown Store in Plainview, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Canton, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Pleasanton, Texas, the Sears Hometown Store in Fulton, Texas, the Sears Appliance Showroom in Sugar Land, Texas, and finally the Sears Hometown Store in Hubble, Texas. In the state of Vermont, we have the Sears Hometown Stores in Barre, Vermont, and the Sears Hometown Store in Morrisville, Vermont. In the state of Washington, we have a couple of them. We have the Sears Hometown Store in Colville, Washington, the Sears Hometown Store in Port Angeles, Washington State, the Sears Hometown Store in Ellensburg, Washington, the Sears Hometown Store in Oak Harbor, Washington, and finally the Sears Hometown Store in Sequim, Washington. In the state of Wisconsin, we have a couple of Sears Hometown locations, the Sears Hometown Store in Menomon, Wisconsin, the Sears Hometown Store in Sparta, Wisconsin, the Sears Hometown Store in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, the Sears Hometown Store in Ashland, Wisconsin, the Sears Hometown Store in Shuddy, Wisconsin, the Sears Hometown Store in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, the Sears Hometown Store in Superior, Wisconsin, and yeah, that's basically it. In the state of Wyoming, we have the Sears Hometown Store in Lamar, Wyoming, and finally the Sears Hometown Store in Sheridan, Wyoming. And guys, that is basically all these non-liquidating Sears Hometown stores, Home and Life, Appliances, Appliance Mattresses, and Appliance Showroom locations. So, anyways, guys, thank you again for watching this video. Link to the list will be located in the video description below. And yeah, so anyways, guys, thank you again for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed this video, and that will be it.